today I'm going to show you a fun technique for an easy embroidery project that uses only white thread and white fabric. The technique we're going to be learning today is called drawn thread work, and it's from a larger genre of embroidery known as white work. We're going to be using this technique to make a napkin or handkerchief. Drawn thread work is often associated with 16th century England, Germany, and Italy. In Italy, it was called punto tirato. However, it may actually have origins much earlier than that. So without further ado, let's get started. First, let's talk briefly about supplies. The main materials you'll need are, as I said, fabric and thread. And although this was traditionally done in white fabric and thread, which is what you'll see me using, you could use any color that you like. In fact, if you're feeling fancy, you could even do a contrasting thread and fabric color. However, if you're new to embroidery, I highly recommend matching your thread and your fabric colors so that any uneven stitches will not be as obvious. In terms of the fiber content of your fabric, I highly recommend linen fabrics. It's much harder to pull out a single thread from a cotton or a synthetic fabric, and you'll see what I mean in just a minute. Fiber content for your thread can be pretty much anything. I'm using linen because I'm extra like that and happen to have linen lying around the house. However, you could use any all-purpose sewing thread, and in fact, if you have DMC cotton embroidery thread lying around, you could use one strand of that as well. You'll also need a pair of regular old sewing scissors, nothing fancy, and a regular hand sewing needle. You're going to start by cutting out your linen into just a regular old square. I did 12 inches by 12 inches, but you could definitely go larger or smaller, whatever size you want. So the first step in drawn thread work is to draw out the threads. So this is where the threads have been taken out, and it's only in one direction. You'll notice we still have a bunch in there because we're going to do fun stuff with that. So I'm going to show you how to continue to draw the threads out. So I'm just going to take a regular old pin. You can see right here that I have a few more threads to pull out. So I'm just going to come under the fabric and just start to pull out very gently. So, and you can do 1 or 2 threads at a time. I wouldn't do a whole lot more than that because it can start to get confusing. So you'll notice you just draw it right out. And don't try and do super long lengths because that can distort your fabric a little bit. So I'm coming up in here. So that was about 1 inch over, and I'm drawing this thread up. And then I'm going to pull on it just a little bit to show myself. Okay, so I can probably get it all the way from over here and draw it up. This is kind of tedious, but it is a necessary step for the drawn thread work. As you're thinking about where you want to start pulling out your threads or drawing out your threads, you want to think about what size of hem allowance you want to leave. So you can see here, I have about 5/8 of an inch from the end of my fabric to where the drawn thread section starts. I would recommend at least a 1/2 inch, probably more like 3/4 of an inch or so. When you're starting a new area of drawn thread work, you actually don't want to start drawing from the corner, because if you think about it, if you cut off the threads right here, they're going to ravel or start to unweave themselves from the fabric a little bit. So what you want to actually do is find a spot near the middle of the area that you're about to do. So let's pick right about here. So what I'm going to do is take my needle and pull out just 1 thread right there. So that's where we're going to start, and I'm going to just measure up to make sure we're about, we're about 3/4 of an inch, 5/8, 3/4 of an inch away, which is just where my other one was. So you can see my little loop that I've pulled out right there. So this is a little terrifying, but we are going to just cut that loop. And now we are going to continue pulling this out, just like I showed you in the section that was already done. So we can give this a little yank to show us approximately where we're going to want to be pulling, and just follow that on over. And that is how you start a new area of drawing the thread. Looks like to sew in the ends. You can see I've taken this thread all the way out to the end, and now I have just woven it back over on itself. So let's take this through nice and gently, because we don't want to have a pucker at the end. And you can see that that is now just part of the material, and it has essentially finished off your thread, so you don't have to worry about it raveling or coming unwoven. And this is what the ends look like after you have woven them in. So you can see there's just a little bit of extra thickness here, but it's basically invisible. So it's a really nice way to finish off the ends. So I wanted to highlight here what happens when you are using a linen or a cotton that is not an even weave with this. And I'm not using an even weave. You don't need even weave for this particular technique. So you can see here, I've taken out 10 threads. But here I've also taken out 10 threads. And you can see that they don't look quite the same in length, and that's just because there are more threads running in one direction than another, and that's very common in a lot of fabrics. And so if you find that when you take out the same number of threads from both sides, that they don't look even, you can just take more out until they look even. So that's exactly what I'm going to do here. I'll take out 2 more threads and see if it looks about even with that. I think I'm probably going to have to take out about 4 more threads here, but just take out a few at a time, because you can't put them back in until you feel that they are pretty evenly balanced. So in this example, this is still the 10 threads that have been removed, and I took out 16 from here, and that's looking a lot more even. So you just keep working until you feel like both of your sides are balanced. Okay, we are now ready for the actual embroidery portion of this tutorial. How exciting. Quick disclaimer, I am left-handed, and so you're gonna see me stitching from left to right, but all you right-handed folks, you are just gonna start at the bottom right-hand corner and go from right to left. In order to get the hem part of this pressed, I know it's too hot for me to turn on my iron right now. I actually prefer to just finger press when I'm working with linen. So you'll see just the heat of your own body as well as your fingernails. If you just run a fingernail along, that actually gives it a pretty good crease. So we're going to fold it once, so that's the raw edge right there. Fold it once, then fold it again to be right up next to your drawn thread section. Give that a nice crease, and that is ready for hemming. Okay, so now for the actual stitch. So this is called hem stitch because we are hemming the fabric while we're taking the stitch. Rather convenient. So what we're going to do is come behind the threads, and I'm going to pick up 6 threads. Let's see here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes. So the needle is going to come up through, and we're just going to pull that thread taut but not tight, and I'll show you what I mean. So this is taut, everything is still laying straight. If you pull it too tight, then you'll notice there's a pucker down here. So you want to pull it taut but not tight. And then we're going to do that one more time. The needle is going to pass behind the 6 threads. So you're making a little bundle of threads. So now we're just going to, you see this little loop of thread, we're going to pull that again taut but not tight. And so now to finish up the stitch, we're just going to come up behind. Let's see if we can get the camera to focus. There we go. Okay, so you can see I'm going up and behind and through. So that is the hem stitch. So this is that nice little series of hem stitches. So we're gathering the drawn threads into these nice little organized bundles. So let's show that whole process one more time. So we are coming up behind, grabbing 6 threads, and we are pulling tight, or rather taut, but not tight, as I said. Then we're going back behind them again. So it's 2 passes the needle. Gather those in nice and close. And then we take a stitch behind. That is the hem stitch. So if you get all the way around your handkerchief with this one row of hem stitching and you are feeling super over it at this point, you could be done. The one slight issue you might find is this top row that doesn't have any stitching can come a little bit loose, as you can see up here. These threads could be prone to slight unweaving of themselves. And so if you're concerned about that, or if you want to keep stitching, what we can do is add another row of stitching to the top. And there are a couple fun and kind of fancy looking, but very easy variations that I'm going to show you now. Want to do this second pass of stitching, we're going to work from the right side of the fabric this time. So if you think about it, the first time we started, we were working from the wrong side because we were folding up the hem as we went. Now, just go back to the same spot you started. Again, you'll be working from right to left. I'm working from left to right because I am left-handed. We are gonna work these stitches right here. So one nice and simple stitching option is simply to keep the thread groupings that you did in your first pass and just reinforce that with another row of hem stitches. So you would come up in that same spot where 6 threads over, come up once, wrap it around, come up again, and then take that little stitch in between. And now you're just going to be catching the fabric itself. You're not trying to catch a hem, so it'll just be 1 or 2 threads. You can see I've got about 2 threads there. And then you'll just go all the way down. So you have these nice, neat little bundles the whole way down. So another variation that is very similar to the one I just showed you, but just changes it up a little bit in a fun way, is to do hem stitch, but to vary the number of threads and the placement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to offset my stitches. So instead of taking 6 threads, I'm going to start with 3 threads coming around the needle. So you can see right here. So I'm coming up once, and then I'm coming up again. And then I'm taking that stitch. So what this does is it creates a fun kind of V or ladder effect. So now we have a smaller group. And then what I'm going to do is take 6 threads, but it's going to be 3 from this group and 3 from this group. So now you can see that V starting to form there. So we take one more pass through and then secure it in. I think about 2 or 3 threads into the fabric. And then you just keep going down, taking 3 threads from the first group and 3 threads from the second group, and continuing on down. So now that I've done a few more stitches, you can really start to see that pattern take shape. So it looks like a group of V's rather than just a little group of columns. So this is another variation of how you can use drawn thread work. This looks fancy, but it is quite simple. It is just the hem stitch, which is what I was just showing you, grouping 2 threads together, and then I added one more thread going through the middle. And there are many variations you can do. This is at the hem of an apron that has smocking at the waist. This is very popular for apron hems. There's an extant piece of a shirt with the wrist cuffs and the neck cuff that has drawn thread work. So hems are a great place to do this, and a handkerchief hem is a wonderful and relatively small and easy way to learn drawn thread work. So I hope you enjoyed this little tutorial. Being stuck at home with limited resources is, if you think about it, historically accurate. And it can be surprising to discover just how many things you can make with the stuff you have on hand at home already. And now, my friends, go forth and make things.